Passion's Best Games Rant. Number 4. Metroid Prime. Metroid. Well, it's funny. Metroid is probably, of all of the first-party Nintendo, legacy franchises, Metroid is probably one of the outliers for me because funny enough, like, Metroid Prime is probably the only Metroid game that I not only like but genuinely love, and the only one that I was able to finish all the way through. I have attempted to play other games in the franchise. I've even tried playing Super Metroid, on the Super Nintendo, which is probably the only other Metroid game that is put in the same level of praise as Metroid Prime. It certainly drew a lot of influence from Super Metroid. The problem is I got about maybe a quarter of the way through that game, and while it was very beautiful and atmospheric for a Super Nintendo title, like it really was impressive how much atmosphere and visual style it conveys on that hardware. I was impressed with all that, but the problem for me was that I had already played Metroid Prime before trying Super Metroid. It was my entry into the franchise. That is the problem I have with the Metroid series, is that if Metroid Prime was your first Metroid game, I feel like that's going to set the bar pretty high, because even the Metroid Prime sequels, Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, which I have played and also quit halfway through because there was too much backtracking. I hated the whole the light and dark mechanic that they cribbed from one of the Zelda games, I believe. And I don't think it worked very well for the Metroid Prime formula. I think Metroid Prime 2 was a real step down from the original, and I've never even played Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. So yeah, my Metroid franchise experience is incredibly limited, and Prime was my entry point into the franchise. It was the first one that really grabbed me, and I definitely not only finished that one, but played it multiple times because it is fantastic. Probably its biggest standout attribute is its level design, which is immaculate, and is the only other video game franchise I can think of that really by quite some measure predated the amazing level design from the Dark Souls games from Software. It accomplishes that rare feat of having level design that is both cohesive and makes sense for the player, but is also atmospheric and feels lived in. It feels like real. The environments feel natural. Which is a tough thing to pull off in video game level design, and Metroid Prime did that before, I think, anyone in 3D gaming. I can't think of any other examples, really, where 3D exploration was handled so beautifully, and it's especially impressive when you consider that the game was outsourced from Nintendo to a Texas-based game studio called Retro Studios, which it was their first time doing a big AAA game like this. It put them on the map after its success, and it's understandable that the game had a lot of doubters when it was being announced. The fact that they were turning this beloved franchise into a first-person shooter, would it be able to retain its exploration? Would it be as well designed or laid out as Super Metroid? And not only did they, accomplish that, but they did it to a degree where, I personally feel has not been topped. Even Retro Studios' own work hasn't really topped Metroid Prime in my eyes. I don't think any 3D exploration game, aside from Software's work, has topped Metroid Prime, to be honest. It's an extremely well-designed game. It's backed by, great music. It still looks pretty good for a GameCube game. I think it was released 2001, so it was among the first games to hit the GameCube. It was definitely one of the best reasons to own a GameCube. And fortunately, it's coming to the Switch again in a re-release, bundled with 2 and 3, so I recommend checking it out any way you can, if you haven't already. And, you know, if you own a Switch, I guess that'll be the best way to play it soon. Yeah, Metroid Prime, one of the greats.